Hey, genuine followers and ardent fans. How are you and your beloved today? It's social activist come good art preacher browser Suresh back with absolute delight for my 106th video on annual of publication on YouTube today, 7th November 2020, Saturday. I have selected iterating air quality and measurement metrics for presentation today. Humans should be ashamed for contaminating everything created by the Supreme, also known as God. We have ruined the environment, in particular air and water, to the extreme, and revival options are very limited. If we make a start now, else human race will be wiped out from Earth once and for all. I appreciate efforts by environmental activists Greta Thunberg and others in this context from the bottom of my heart. Air pollution is a presence of substances in the atmosphere that are harmful to the health of humans and other living beings or cause damage to the climate or to materials. There are different types of air pollutants, such as gases, particulates, organic and inorganic biological molecules. Air pollution may cause diseases, allergies, and even death to humans. It may also cause harm to other living organisms, such as animals and food crops, and may damage the natural or built environment. Both human activity and natural processes can generate air pollution. Air pollution is a significant risk factor for a number of pollution-related diseases, including respiratory infections, heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, stroke, and lung cancer. The human health effects of poor air quality are far-reaching, but principally affect the body's respiratory system and the cardiovascular system. Individual reactions to air pollutants depend on the type of pollutant a person is exposed to, the degree of exposure, and the individual's health status and genetics. Indoor air pollution and poor urban air quality are listed as two of the world's worst toxic air pollution problems. In the 2008 Blacksmith Institute World's Worst Polluted Places report, outdoor air pollution alone causes 2.1 to 4.2 to 1 million deaths annually. Overall, air pollution causes the deaths of around 7 million people worldwide each year and is the world's largest single environmental health risk. Productivity losses and degraded quality of life caused by air pollution are estimated to cost the world economy $5 trillion per year. Various pollution control technologies and strategies are available to reduce air pollution. Air pollutant is a material in the air that can have adverse effects on humans and the ecosystem. The substance can be solid particles, liquid droplets, or gases. A pollutant can be of natural origin or man-made. Pollutants are classified as primary or secondary. Primary pollutants are usually produced by processes such as ash from a volcanic eruption. Other examples include carbon monoxide gas from motor vehicle exhaust or sulfur dioxide released from factories. Secondary pollutants are not emitted directly, but rather they form in the air when primary pollutants react or interreact. In fact, ground level ozone is a prominent example. We say there is a hole in the ozone layer. Ground level ozone is a prominent example of a secondary pollutant. Some pollutants may be both primary and secondary. They are both emitted directly and formed from other primary pollutants. Pollutants emitted into the atmosphere for human activity include carbon dioxide, CO2. Because of its role as a greenhouse gas, it has been described as a leading pollutant and the worst climate pollutant. Carbon dioxide is a natural component of the atmosphere, essential for plant life and given off by the human respiratory system. The question of terminology has practical effects, for example, as determining whether the US Clean Air Act is deemed to regulate CO2 emissions. CO2 generally forms about 400 parts per million ppm of Earth's atmosphere compared to about 280 ppm in pre-industrial times, and billions of metric tons of carbon dioxide are emitted annually by burning of fossil fuels. CO2 increases in Earth's atmosphere has been accelerating sulfur oxides, SOx, particularly sulfur dioxide, a chemical compound with the formula SO2. SO2 is produced by volcanoes and in various industrial processes. Coal and petroleum often contain sulfur compounds. Their combustion generates sulfur dioxide. Further oxidation of sulfur dioxide, usually in the presence of a catalyst such as nitric oxide, form sulfuric acid, HKSO4, and thus acid rain is formed. This is one of the causes for concern over the environmental impact of the use of these fuels as power source. Nitrogen oxides, NOx, nitrogen oxides, particularly nitrogen dioxide (NO2), are expelled on from high temperature combustion and are also produced from during thunderstorms by electric discharge. They can be seen as a brown haze dome above or a plume downward of cities. Nitrogen oxide dioxide is a chemical compound with the formula NO2. It is one of the several nitrogen oxides. One of the most prominent air pollutants is reddish brown toxic gas has characteristics of characteristic sharp biting odor. Carbon monoxide, which is called as a silent killer. CO is colorless, odorless, toxic gas. It is a product of combustion of fuels such as natural gas, coal, or wood. It is vehicular exhaust contributes to the majority of carbon monoxide leading to our atmosphere. A lot of people die because of CO2, CO, carbon monoxide. It creates a smog type formation in the air that has been linked to many lung diseases and disruptions to the natural environment and animals. Volatile organic compounds, VOC. VOCs are a well-known outdoor air pollutant. They are categorized as either methane, CH4, or non-methane. Methane is an extremely efficient greenhouse gas which contributes to enhanced global warming. Other hydrocarbon VOCs are also significant greenhouse gases because of their role in creating ozone and prolonging the life of methane in the atmosphere. This effect varies depending on local air quality. The aromatic non-methane volatile organic compounds benzene, toluene, and xylene are suspected carcinogens, causes cancer, and may lead to leukemia and prolonged exposure. The prolonged agent. Butadiene is another dangerous compound often associated with industrial use. Particulate matter PM particles, alternately referred to as particulate matter PM, atmospheric PM, or fine particles, are tiny particles of solid or liquid suspended in a gas. In contrast, aerosol refers to combined particles and gas. Some particulates occur naturally, originating from volcanoes, dust storms, forests, and grassland fires, living vegetation, and sea spray. Human activities such as the burning of fossil fuels in vehicles, power plants, and various industrial processes also generate significant amounts of aerosols. Average worldwide anthropogenic aerosols those made by human activities currently account for approximately 10% of our atmosphere. Increased levels of fine particles in the air are linked to health hazards such as heart disease, altered lung function, and lung cancer. Particulates are related to respiratory infections and can be particularly harmful to those already suffering from conditions like asthma. Persistent free radicals connected to airborne fine particles are linked to cardiopulmonary disease. Toxic metals such as lead and mercury, especially their compounds, chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, harmful to the ozone layer, emitted from products are currently banned from use, not in underdeveloped and developing countries, even in India, they are still using. These are gases which are released from air conditioners, refrigerators, aerosol sprays, etc. On release into the air, CFCs rise to the stratosphere. Here they come in contact with other gases and damage the ozone layer. There is a hole. Ozone, reduces the radiation. This allows harmful ultraviolet rays to reach the Earth's surface. This can lead to skin cancer, eye disease, and can even cause damage to plants. Ammonia emitted mainly from the agricultural waste. Ammonia is a compound with the formula NH3. It is normally encountered by a gas with a characteristic pungent odor. Ammonia, Ammonium significantly contributes to the nutrition needs of terrestrial organisms by serving as a precursor to foodstuffs and fertilizer. Ammonia, either directly or indirectly, is also a building block for the synthesis of many pharmaceuticals, although in wide use. Ammonia is both caustic and hazardous. In the atmosphere, ammonia reacts with oxides of nitrogen and sulfur to form secondary particles. Odors, such as from garbage, sewage, and industrial process. Radioactive pollutants produced by nuclear explosions, nuclear events, war explosives, and natural processes such as the radioactive decay of radon. Secondary pollutants include particulates created from gaseous primary pollutants and compounds in photochemical smog. Smog is a kind of air pollution. Classic smog results from large amounts of coal burning in an area caused by a mixture of smoke and sulfur dioxide. Modern smog does not usually come from coal but from vehicular and industrial emissions that are acted on the atmosphere by UV light from the sun to form secondary pollutants that also combine with the primary emissions to form photochemical smog. Ground level ozone O3 formed from nitric oxide, NOx, and VOCs. Ozone is a key constituent of the stratosphere. It is also an important constituent of certain regions of the stratosphere, commonly known as the ozone layer. Photochemical and chemical reactions involving it drive many of the chemical processes that occur in the atmosphere by day and night. And at abnormally high concentrations brought about by human activities, largely the combustion of fossil fuel, it's a pollutant and the constituent of a smog. Peroxyacetyl nitrate, C2H3NO5, similarly formed from NOx and VOCs. Minor air pollutants include a large number of minor hazardous air pollutants. Some of these are regulated in USA under the Clean Air Act and in Europe under the Air Framework Directive. A variety of persistent organic pollutants which can attach to particles. Persistent organic pollutants, POPs, are organic compounds that are resistant to environmental degradation through chemical, biological, and photolytic process. Because of this, they have been observed to persist in the environment, to be capable of long-range transport, bioaccumulate in human and animal tissue, biomagnify in food chains, and to have potentially significant impacts on human health and the environment. Sources of air pollutants are anthropogenic, human-made sources. These are mostly related to the burning of fuel. Natural sources: dust, methane, radon gas, smoke, and carbon monoxide, vegetation, volcanic activity. Air pollutant emission factors are reported representative values that attempt to relate the quantity of air pollutant released to the ambient air with an activity associated with the release of the pollutant. These factors are usually expressed as the weight of pollutant divided by a unit weight, volume, distance, or duration of the activity emitting the pollutant. Such factors facilitate estimation of emissions from various sources of air pollution. In most cases, these factors are simply averages of all available data of acceptable quality and are generally assumed to be representative of long-term averages. There are 12 compounds in the list of POPs. Dioxins and furans are two of them, and intentionally created by combustion of organics like open burning of plastics. The open burning of plastics releases carcinogens also that leads to cancer. These compounds are also endocrine disruptors and can mutate the human genes. Air pollution risk is a function of the hazard of the pollutant and the exposure to that pollutant. Air pollution exposure can be expressed for an individual, for certain groups, or for entire populations. For example, one may want to calculate the exposure to a hazardous air pollutant for a geographic area, which includes the various microenvironments and age groups. This can be calculated as an inhalation exposure. This would account for daily exposure in various settings. Example, different indoor microenvironments and outdoor locations. The exposure needs to include different age and other demographic groups, especially infants, children, pregnant women, and other sensitive subpopulations. The exposure to an air pollutant must integrate the concentrations of the air pollutant with respect to the time spent in each setting and the respective inhalation rates for each subgroup for each specific time that the subgroup is in the setting and engaged in particular activities. For example, a small child's inhalation rate will be less than that of an adult. A child engaged in vigorous exercise will have a higher respiration rate than the same child in a sedentary activity. The daily exposure that needs to reflect the time spent in each microenvironmental setting and the type of activities in these settings, the air pollutant concentration in each microenvironmental setting is summed to indicate the exposure. For some pollutants, such as black carbon, traffic-related exposures may dominate total exposure despite short exposure times. Since high concentrations coincide with the proximity to major roads or participation to motorized traffic, a large portion of total daily exposure occurs as short peaks of high concentrations, but it remains unclear how to define peaks and determine their frequency and health impact. The lack of ventilation indoors concentrates air pollution where people often spend the majority of the time. Radon gas, a carcinogen, is exuded from the earth in certain locations and trapped inside houses. Building materials, including carpeting and plywood, emit formaldehyde, H2CO gas. Paint and solvents give off VOCs as they dry. Especially lead-based paints are very bad. Lead paint can degenerate into dust and can be inhaled. Yeah, these things are banned in developed countries, but underdeveloped and developing countries are still using all these damn materials. Intentional air pollution is introduced with the use of air fresheners, incense, and other scented items. Controlled wood fires in stoves and fireplaces can add significant amounts of smoke particulates into the air inside and out. Indoor air pollution fatalities may be caused by using pesticides and other chemical sprays indoors without proper ventilation. Carbon monoxide poisoning and fatalities are often caused by faulty vents and chimneys or by burning of charcoal indoors or in a confined space such as a tent. Chronic carbon monoxide poisoning can result even from poorly adjusted pilot lights. Traps are built into all domestic plumbing to keep sewer gas and hydrogen sulfide out of interior. Hydrogen sulfide, Dalton Exman, out of interiors. Clothing emits tetrachloroethylene or other dry cleaning fluids for days after dry cleaning. Though its use has now been banned in many countries, the extensive use of asbestos, in industrial and domestic environments in the past has left a potentially very dangerous material in many localities. Asbestos is mainly used for roofing and as a thermal insulation material. Countries like India are still using it, I know. And even they are getting ships from US and for dismantling, for tearing down. They are making money out of it. Asbestosis is a chronic inflammatory medical condition affecting the tissue of the lungs or lung in Maharashtra. Okay, it occurs after long-term heavy exposure to asbestos from asbestos-containing materials in structures. Sufferers have severe dyspnea, shortness of breath, and are at an increased risk regarding several different types of lung cancer. As clear explanations are not always stressed in non-technical literature, care should be taken to distinguish between several forms of relevant diseases. According to the WHO, World Health Organization, these may be defined. These are defined as asbestosis, lung cancer, and peritoneal mesothelioma. Generally, a very rare form of cancer. When more widespread, it is almost always associated with prolonged exposure to asbestos. Silicosis, asbestosis, it leads to a lot of breathing problems. People die gradually. Biological sources of air pollution are also found indoors as gases and airborne particulates. Pets produce dander. People produce dust from minute skin flakes and decomposed air. Dust mites in bedding, carpeting, and furniture produce enzymes and micrometer-sized fecal droppings. Inhabitants emit methane, mold forms on walls and generates mycotoxins and spores. Air conditioning systems can incubate Legionnaires, disease, and mold, and houseplants, soil, and surrounding gardens can produce pollen, dust, and mold. Indoors, the lack of air circulation allows these airborne pollutants to accumulate more than they would otherwise occur in nature. In 2012, air pollution caused premature deaths on average of 1 year in Europe and was a significant risk factor for a number of pollution-related diseases. including respiratory infections, heart disease, COPD, stroke, and lung cancer. The health effects caused by air pollution may include difficulty in breathing, wheezing, coughing, asthma, and worsening of existing respiratory and cardiac conditions. These effects can result in increased medication use, increased doctor or emergency department visits, more hospital admissions, and premature death. The human health effects of poor air quality are far reaching, but principally affect the body's respiratory system and the cardiovascular system. Individual reactions to air pollutants depend on the type of pollutant a person is exposed to, the degree of exposure, and the individual's health status and genetics. The most common sources of air pollution include particulates, ozone, nitrogen oxide, and sulfur dioxide. Children aged less than 5 years that live in developing countries are the most vulnerable population in terms of total deaths attributable to indoor and outdoor air pollution. India's highest death rate due to air pollution. India also has more deaths from asthma than any other nation, according to the WHO. In December 2013, air pollution was estimated to kill 500,000 people in China each year. There is a positive correlation between pneumonia related deaths and air pollution from motor vehicle emissions. Annual premature European deaths caused by air pollution are estimated at 430,000 to 800,000. An important cause of these deaths is nitrogen dioxide and other nitrogen oxides, NOx, emitted by road vehicles. In a 2015 consultation document of the US government, the UK government disclosed the nitrogen dioxide is responsible for 23,500 premature UK deaths per annum. Across the European Union, air pollution is estimated to reduce life expectancy by almost 9 months. Causes of deaths include strokes, heart disease, COPD, lung cancer, and lung infections. Urban outdoor air pollution is estimated to cause 1.3 million deaths worldwide per year. Children are particularly at risk due to the immaturity of their respiratory organ systems. The US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, estimated in 2004 that a proposed set of changes in diesel engine technology could result in 12,000 fewer premature mortalities, 15,000 fewer heart attacks, 6,000 fewer emergency department visits by children with asthma, and 8,900 fewer respiratory related hospital admissions each year in the US. The US EPA has estimated that limiting ground level ozone concentration to 65 parts per billion would avoid 1,700 to 5,100 premature deaths worldwide in 2020. Yeah, this is 2020 compared with the 75 ppb parts per billion standard. The agency projected a more protective standard that would also prevent an additional 26,000 cases of aggravated asthma and more than a million cases of missed work or school. Following the assessment, the EPA acted to protect public health by lowering the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, shortly NAQS, NWAQS, for ground level ozone at 70 ppb. A new economic study of the health impacts and associated costs of air pollution in the Los Angeles Basin and San Joaquin Valley of Southern California shows that more than 3,800 people die prematurely each year because air pollution levels violate federal standards. Everywhere it is violated. Number of annual premature deaths is considerably higher than the fatalities related to auto collisions in the same area, which average fewer than 2,000 per year. Diesel exhaust is a major contributor to DE. It's a major contributor to combustion-derived PM air pollution. In several human experimental studies using a well-validated exposure chamber setup, DE has been linked to acute vascular dysfunction and increased thrombus formation. The mechanisms linking air pollution to increased cardiovascular mortality are uncertain, but probably include pulmonary and systemic inflammation. A study by Greenpeace estimates that there are 4.5 million annual premature deaths worldwide because of pollutants released by high emission power stations and vehicle exhausts. 65,000 deaths occur in the Middle East each year due to pollution. Increase in air pollution increases cardiovascular disease, lung diseases, cancer, adverse health effects on children and infants. Central nervous system is ruined, crop yield reductions, economic effects, natural disasters like acid rain, flooding, and drought. There are now practical alternates to the principal causes of air pollution: areas downwind, over 20 miles of major airports, more than double total particulate emissions in air, even when factoring in areas with frequent ship calls and heavy freeway and city traffic like Los Angeles. Aviation biofuel mixed in with jet fuel at a 50-50 ratio can reduce jet-derived cruise altitude particulate emissions by 50 to 70%, according to NASA-led 2017 study. Ship propulsion and idling can be switched to much cleaner fuels like natural gas. Combustion of fossil fuels for space heating can be replaced by using ground source heat pumps and occasional thermal energy storage. Electric power generation from burning fossil fuels can be replaced by power generation from nuclear and renewables. For poor nations, heating and home stoves that contribute much to general regional air pollution can be replaced by a much cleaner fossil fuel like natural gas or ideally renewables. Motor vehicles driven by fossil fuels, a key factor in urban air pollution, can be replaced by electric vehicles. Though lithium supply and cost is a limitation, there are alternatives. Herding more people into clean public transit, such as electric trains, can also help. Nevertheless, even in emission-free electric vehicles, rubber tires produce significant amounts of air pollution themselves, ranking as 13th worst pollutant in Los Angeles. Reducing travel in vehicles can curb pollution. After Stockholm reduced vehicle traffic in the central city with the congestion tax, nitrogen dioxide and PM10, particulate matter 10, pollution declined, as did acute pediatric asthma attacks. Biodigesters can be utilized in poor nations where slash and burn is prevalent, turning a useless commodity into a source of income. The plants can be gathered and sold to a central authority that will break it down to a large modern biodigester, producing much needed energy to use. Induced humidity and ventilation both can greatly dampen air pollution in enclosed spaces, which was found to be relatively high inside subway lines due to braking and friction, and relatively less ionically inside transit buses than lower sitting passenger automobiles or subways. Various pollution control technologies and strategies are available to reduce air pollution. At its most basic level, land use planning is likely to involve zoning and transport infrastructure planning. In most developed countries, land use planning is an important part of social policy, ensuring the land is used efficiently for the benefit of the wider economy and population, as well as to protect the environment. Because a large share of air pollution is caused by combustion of fossil fuels such as coal and oil, the reduction of these fuels can reduce air pollution drastically. Most effective is the switch to cleaner power sources such as wind power, solar power, hydropower, fuel cells which do not cause air pollution, or air pollution will be less. You cannot say it completely, totally avoided. Efforts to reduce pollution from mobile sources include primary regulation, expanding regulation to new sources, increased fuel efficiency, conversion to cleaner fuels, or conversion to electric vehicles. Okay, air pollution will never reduce since electricity is generated through power plants, which results in so much pollution, including radiation, if nuclear power plants are used. So how do they say electric vehicles will release the pollution? I don't understand. How would the electric vehicles run without any power? It's a perpetual motion machine. Titanium dioxide has been researched for its ability to reduce air pollution. Ultraviolet light will release free electrons from material, thereby creating free radicals which break up VOCs and NOx gases. One form is superhydrophilic. A very effective means to reduce air pollution is a transition to renewable energy. According to a study published in Energy and Environmental Science in 2015, the switch to 100% renewable energy in the US would eliminate about 62,000 premature mortalities per year and about 42,000 in 2050 if no biomass were used. This would save about $600 billion in health costs a year due to reduced air pollution in 2050, or about 3.6% of the 2014 US gross domestic product, GDP. The following items are commonly used as pollution control devices in industry and transportation. They can either destroy contaminants or remove them. The construction sector leads to a lot of dust. They can either destroy contaminants or remove them from an exhaust stream before it is emitted into the atmosphere. Particulate control, mechanical collectors, electrostatic precipitators. Electrostatic precipitator, ESP, or electrostatic air cleaner is a particulate collections device that removes particles from a flowing gas using the force of an induced electrostatic charge. ESPs are highly efficient filtration devices that minimally impede the flow of gases through the device and can easily remove fine particulates such as dust and smoke from the air stream. Baghouses designed to handle heavy dust loads. A dust collector consists of a blower, dust filter, a filter cleaning system, and a dust receptacle or dust removal system. Particulate scrubbers. Wet scrubber is a form of pollution control technology. The term describes a variety of devices that use pollutants from a furnace, flue gas, or from other gas streams. In a wet scrubber, the polluted gas stream is brought into contact with the scrubbing liquid by spraying it with a liquid, by forcing it through a pool of liquid, or by some other contact method so as to remove the pollutants. NOx control, low NOx burners, selective catalytic reduction, SCR, selective non-catalytic reduction, SNCR, NOx scrubbers, exhaust gas recirculation, catalytic converter. Exhaust gas recirculation will reduce the energy use also. Catalytic converter also for VOC control, VOC abatement, absorption systems, absorption system using activated carbon such as fluidized bed concentrator, flares, thermal oxidizers, catalytic converters, biofilters, absorption, scrubbing, cryogenic condensers, vapor recovery systems, acid gas, sulfur dioxide control, wet scrubbers, dry scrubbers, flue gas desulfurization, mercury control, sorbent absorbent technology, sorbent injection technology, electrocatalytic oxidation, K-fuel, dioxin and furan control, miscellaneous associated equipment, source capturing systems, continuous emission monitoring system, SIEMS. In general, there are two types of air quality standards. The first class of standards, such as the US National Ambient Air Quality Standards, NAAQS, and EU Air Quality Directive, set maximum atmospheric concentrations for specific pollutants. Environmental agencies enact regulations which are intended to result in attainment of these target levels. The second class, such as North American Air Quality Index, takes the form of a scale with the various thresholds, which is used to communicate to the public the relative risk of outdoor activity. The scale may or may not distinguish between different pollutants. The air pollution hotspots are areas where air pollution emissions expose individuals to increased negative health effects. They are particularly common in highly populated urban areas where there may be a combination of stationary sources and mobile sources of pollution. Emissions from these sources can cause respiratory disease, childhood asthma, cancer, and other health problems. Fine PM, such as diesel soot, which contributes to more than 3.2 million premature deaths around the world each year, is a significant problem. In India, everybody uses diesel because diesel is heavily subsidized and they are paying indirectly, spending money on health. It is very small and can lodge itself within the lungs and enter the bloodstream. Diesel soot is concentrated in densely populated areas, and 1 in 6 people in the US live near diesel pollution hotspots. While air pollution hotspots affect a variety of populations, some groups are more likely to be located in hotspots. Previous studies have shown disparities in exposure to pollution by race and or income, hazardous land uses, toxic storage and disposal facilities, manufacturing facilities, major roadways tend to be located where property values and income levels are low. Low socioeconomic status can be a proxy for other kinds of social vulnerability, including race, a lack of ability to influence regulation, and a lack of ability to move to neighborhoods with less environmental pollution. Industrialization has only increased the pollution. Contamination, air, water, noise levels, everything. These communities bear a disproportionate burden of environmental pollution and are more likely to face health risks such as cancer or asthma. Studies show that patterns in race and income disparities not only indicate a higher exposure to pollution, excuse me, but also higher risk of adverse health outcomes. Communities characterized by low socioeconomic status and racial minorities can be more vulnerable to cumulative adverse health impacts resulting from elevated exposure to pollutants than more privileged communities. Blacks and Latinos generally face more pollution than whites and Asians. Low-income communities bear a higher burden of risk than affluent ones. Racial discrepancies are particularly distinct in suburban areas of the southern US and metropolitan areas of the Midwestern and Western US. Residents in public housing who are generally low income cannot move to healthier neighborhoods are highly affected by nearby refineries and chemical plants. Air pollution is usually concentrated in densely populated metropolitan areas, especially in developing countries where environmental regulations are relatively lax or non existent. However, even populated areas in developed countries attain unhealthy levels of pollution, with Los Angeles and Rome being two classic examples. Between 2002 and 2011, the incidence of lung cancer in Beijing, China, never near doubled. While smoking remains the leading cause of lung cancer in China, the number of smokers is falling while lung cancer rates are rising. Dust and construction contribute about 43% to the air pollution in India. That's what I said. They don't bother. They don't take any measures to curb it, which is followed by waste burning. Dust and construction activities are mostly in the urban areas, while waste burning is in the rural areas, mainly agriculture. Air pollution in India is a serious health issue. Of the most polluted cities in the world, 21 of the 30 are in India. In 2019, as per a study based on 2016 data, at least 140 million people in India breathe air that is 10 times or more over the WHO safe limit, and 13 of the world's 20 cities with the highest annual levels of air pollution are in India. Is it something that we need to be proud of, Indians? 50% of air pollution is caused by industries, 27% by vehicles, 17% by crop burning, and 5% by fireworks. Air pollution contributes to the premature deaths of 2 million Indians every year. Emissions come from vehicles and industry, whereas in rural areas, much of the pollution comes from biomass. Yeah, since they are using conventional stoves, biomass burning for cooking and keeping warm. In autumn and winter months, large-scale crop residue burning in agriculture fields, the cheaper alternative to mechanical tilling, is a major source of smoking. Delhi, it is the capital city of India. It is the worst affected because of farmers burning the stubble in Punjab and Haryana. They need to be killed. The smoke and the smog and particulate pollution in India has a low per capita emission of greenhouse gases, but the country as a whole is the third largest greenhouse gas producer after China and the US because of the population. Who needs so much population? A 2013 study of non-smokers has found that have 30% weaker lung function than Europeans. The Air Prevention and Control of Pollution Act was passed in 1981 to regulate air pollution, but has failed to reduce pollution because of poor enforcement of the rules. In 2015, Government of India, together with IIT Kanpur, launched the National Air Quality Index. In 2019, India launched the National Clean Air Program with a tentative national target of 20 to 30% reduction in PM 2.5 and PM10 concentrations by 2024, considering 2017 as a base year for comparison. It will be rolled out in 102 cities that are considered to have air quality worse than national ambient air quality standards. First, it should be rolled out in Delhi. There are other initiatives such as 1,600-kilometer long and 5-kilometer wide, the Great Green Wall of Aravalli Green Ecological Corridor along Aravalli Range from Gujarat to Delhi, which will also connect the Shivalik Hill Range with the planting of $1.335 billion. It is equal to new native trees over 10 years to combat the pollution. 1.3 billion trees. Okay. Cooking fuel in rural India is prepared from a wet mix of dried grass, fuel, wood pieces, hay, leaves, and mostly cow livestock dung. This mix is patted down into disc-shaped cakes, dried, and then used as fuel in stoves. They can, generate coal gas and use it later. When it burns, it produces smoke and numerous indoor air pollutants at concentrations 5 times higher than coal. Biomethanation. Okay. Fuel wood and biomass burning is a primary reason for near permanent haze and smoke observed above rural and urban India and in satellite pictures of the country. Fuel wood and biomass cakes are used for cooking and general heating needs. These are burnt in cook stoves known as chulha peas in some parts of India. These cook stoves are present in over 100 million Indian households and are used 2 to 3 times a day daily. Some reports, including one by WHO, claim 300,000 to 400,000 people die of indoor air pollution and carbon monoxide poisoning in India because of biomass burning and use of chullas. Air pollution is also the main cause of the Asian brown cloud, which is delaying the start of the monsoon. The burning of biomass and firewood will not stop until electricity or clean burning fuel and combustion technologies become reliable, available, and widely used in rural and urban India. LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. No? India is the world's largest consumer of fuel wood, agricultural waste, and biomass for energy purposes. From the most recent available nationwide study, India used 148.7 million tons coal replacement work of fuel wood and biomass annually for domestic energy use. India's national average per annual per capita consumption of fuel wood, agricultural waste, and biomass cakes was 206 kilograms coal equivalent. The overall contribution of fuel wood, including sawdust and wood waste, was about 46% of the total, the rest being agricultural waste and biomass dung cakes. Traditional fuel dominates domestic energy use in rural India, accounts for about 90% of the total. In urban areas, this traditional fuel constitutes about 24% of the total. India burns tenfold more fuel wood every year than the US. The fuel wood quality in India is different from the dry firewood of the US, and the Indian stoves in use are less efficient, including the LPG gas stove, wasting a lot of heat, thereby producing more smoke and air pollutants per kilogram equivalent. Indian automobiles run on adulterated fuel blends. Adulteration of gasoline and diesel with lower price fuels is common in South Asia, including India. Some adulterants increase emissions of harmful pollutants from vehicles, worsening urban air pollution. Financial incentives arising from different taxes are generally the primary cause of fuel adulteration. In India and other developing countries, gasoline carries a much higher tax than diesel, which in turn is taxed more than kerosene meant as cooking fuel, while some solvents and lubricants carry little or no tax. As fuel prices rise, the public transport driver cuts costs by blending the cheaper hydrocarbon into a highly taxed hydrocarbon. The blending may be as much as 20 to 30% for a low wage driver. The adulteration can yield short term savings that are significant over the month. The consequences to long term air pollution, quality of life, and effect on health are simply ignored. Also ignored are the reduced life of vehicle engine and higher maintenance costs, particularly in the taxi. If the taxi, auto rickshaw, or truck is being rented for a daily rate fee, adulterated fuel increases tailpipe emissions, exhaust emissions, in simple terms, of hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, and oxides of nitrogen, NOx, and particulate matter PM. Air toxin emissions, which fall into the category of unregulated emissions of primary concern, are benzene and polyaromatic hydrocarbons, PAH, both well-known carcinogens, cancer causing. Kerosene is more difficult to burn than gasoline. In addition, results in higher levels of hydrocarbon, carbon monoxide, and PM emissions even from catalyst-equipped cars, catalytic converters. The higher sulfur level of kerosene is another issue. Traffic congestion is severe in India's cities and towns because of overpopulation. Traffic density, is very high. Population density is also very high. The country with the highest population density is Bangladesh. Next is maybe India. Traffic congestion is caused by several reasons, some of which are increase in number of vehicles per kilometer of available roads, lack of intra-city divided lane, highways, and intra-city expressways networks, lack of intercity expressway, traffic accidents and chaos due to poor enforcement of traffic laws. Traffic congestion reduces the average traffic speed. At low speed, scientific studies reveal that vehicles burn in fuel inefficiently and pollute more per trip. An average trip speeds between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. The car's pollutant emission was twice as much as when the average speed was 55 to 75 kilometers per hour. An average trip speeds between 5 and 20 kilometers per hour. The car's pollutant emissions are 4 to 8 times as much when the average speed was 55 to 75 kilometers per hour. It's not only the speed, speed changes, fuel emissions, Fuel efficiency similarly were much worse with traffic congestion. India was the third largest emitter of CO2 in 2017 at 6.82% share of CO2 emissions after China 27.21% and US 14.58%. Asthma is a leading health problem faced by Indians. Not surprisingly, it accounts for more than 50% of the health problems caused by air pollution. The most important reasons for concern over the worsening air pollution in India is its effect on the health of individuals. Exposure to PM for a long time can lead to respiratory and cardiovascular diseases such as asthma, bronchitis, COPD, lung cancer, and heart attack. The Global Burden of Disease study for 2010, published in 2013, had found that outdoor air pollution was the fifth largest killer in India, and around 620,000 yearly deaths occurred from air pollution related diseases in the year 2010. India also has one of the highest number of COPD patients and the highest number of deaths due to COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Over a million Indians dying prematurely every year due to air pollution. According to the non-profit Health Effects Institute, over 2 million children, half the children in Delhi have abnormalities in their lung function. According to the Delhi Heart and Lung Institute, over the past decade, air pollution has increased in India significantly. Asthma is the most common health problem faced by Indians, and it accounts for more than half the health issues caused by air pollution. The Global Burden of Disease study of 2017, analyzed in a report by the Lancet, indicated that 76.8% of Indians are exposed to higher ambient PM over 40 micrograms per meter cubic meters, which is highly significantly above the national limit recommended by national guidelines on ambient air pollution. Study estimated that of 480.7 million disability adjusted life years in India, 4.5% of could be observed ascribed to ambient air pollution. 15.8 million of them were the result of polluted air in households. In terms of average life expectancy, it is suggested that average life expectancy in India would increase by 1.7 years if exposure was limited to national minimum recommendations. Nowadays people go to oxygen parlors to breathe pure oxygen because the percentage of oxygen in the atmosphere keeps decreasing. Atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, more than 70%, and about 20% oxygen, and the rest other gases. But nowadays it has reduced. In future, don't be surprised if people have to move with the oxygen cylinder attached to the back. Like we are paying for water, edible quality water, it might happen to air also. Ambient air pollution in India is estimated to cause 67,000 deaths annually, and particularly aggravates respiratory and cardiovascular conditions, including chronic bronchitis, lung cancer, and asthma. Ambient air pollution is linked to increase in hospital visits with a higher concentration of outdoor pollution particulates, resulting in emergency room visit increases of between 20 to 25% for a range of conditions associated with higher exposure to air pollution. According to the WHO, India is 14 out of the 15 most polluted cities in the world in terms of PM 2.5 concentrations. All Indians be proud about it. Other Indian cities have registered very high levels of PM 2.5 pollutants. 2.5 pollutants are Delhi, Patna, Agra, Muzaffarpur, Srinagar, Gurgaon, Jaipur, Patiala, and Jodhpur, followed by Ali Subah, Al Salam in Kuwait, and a few cities in China and Mongolia. The Air Quality Index (AQI) is a number used to communicate the level of pollution in the air, and it essentially tells you the level of pollution in the air in a given city on a given day. The AQI of Delhi was placed under the severe plus category when it touched 574 by the System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research in May 2014. The WHO announced New Delhi as the most polluted city in the world, capital city of India. In November 2016, the Great Smog of Delhi was an environmental event New Delhi and adjoining areas in a dense blanket of smog, which was the worst in 17 years. 17. India's Central Pollution Control Board now routinely monitors four air pollutants, namely sulfur dioxide, NOx, suspended particulate matter (SPM), and respirable particulate matter (PM10). Air Quality Index (AQI) is used by government agencies to communicate to the public how polluted the air currently is or how polluted it is forecast to become. Public health risk increases as the AQI rises. Different countries have their own air quality indices corresponding to different national air quality standards. Indoor air quality (IAQ) is air quality within and around buildings and structures. IAQ is known to affect the health, comfort, and well-being of building occupants. Poor IAQ has been linked to sick building syndrome. Financially affluent, they have gone for air cleaners, air filtration, especially the HEPA filters. Okay, reduce productivity and impaired learning in schools. IAQ can be affected by gases, including carbon monoxide, radon, VOC. Air quality standards are legal standards or requirements governing concentrations of air pollutants breathed air, both outdoors and indoors. Such standards generally are expressed as levels of specific air pollutants that are deemed acceptable in ambient air and are most often designed to reduce or eliminate the human health effects of air pollution. The US National Ambient Air Quality Standards, we already mentioned, NAAQS, are limited to atmospheric concentration of six pollutants that cause smog, acid rain, and other health hazards. Established by the US EPA and the authority of the Clean Air, NAAQS is applied for outdoor air throughout the country. If people are ignorant, they can be educated and awareness can be created. The real issue is industries and people who are either financially or politically affluent outrightly violate the rules and regulations. Classic examples are dyeing units, DYE, coloring in Karur and leather tanneries in Ambur, discharging their liquid effluents in nearby streams without any treatment whatsoever. Gasoline stations adulterating fuel, people not using public transport systems and using their own vehicles just for one person in a car. No carpooling, bursting crackers for all occasions, whether it is joyous or sad, like funerals. Even bursting crackers during festivals, it should be done only during the limited time. But people that frame the rules themselves are bursting crackers anytime as they please, disturbing so many elders, children, animals, farmers burning agricultural waste, people burning all kinds of waste to keep themselves warm, rural households still using conventional stoves with firewood, etc. People burning all based on Bogi days. Bogi. It is called as a festival of farmers before Pongal in January in India. The list is endless. Unless otherwise, the punishment is more rigorous. Corruption is curbed in government departments. These things will only keep increasing. Certain times, the polluters are in some place whereas the effect is somebody else, like, for example, acid rain. So many conventions have been conducted to reduce the carbon footprint. Certain resolutions are made but not followed through and implemented. Ultimately, it's of no use. What's the point in talking about it when you don't have any intention to doing it? There is no point in just talking. Requisite action should be taken without any time delay. Debates, discussion on open-ended topics like this can go on forever. Anyhow, let me pull the plug here. We'll meet again real soon with another interesting topic. Some of the statements, views expressed are solely mine, gained over 6 decades of versatile experience. Always watch these videos with subtitles, closed caption for absolute 100% comprehension as per my sincere recommendation zillion times so far. I know I rushed through to complete the presentation in 20 minutes max, which is a norm I had set myself to retain the viewer's attention. But I know pretty well that I am exceeding that. I take double the time. Today I will take triple the time, I know. Since I make honest attempts to cover the selected topic more elaborately including so many intricate fine details referring a wide variety of sources, especially Wikipedia. Besides articles and books published recently, besides, of course, I sprinkle my own salt and pepper and season it with my personal experience so far in my life. And also intuition, stay at home as much as possible to maintain social distancing attributed to pandemic, novel COVID-19, and prolong your lifespan. Lead a healthy life. God alone can put a stop to natural and unnatural events, maybe bio and cyber or events like pandemics, which may lead to apocalypse and extinction of all sentient species on the earth for no fault of the others. Rest in peace and harmony.